Welcome back, Dram fans. We have yet another new Glenmorangie in town. This is, I think this appeared just before they rebranded the 10 to the new Glenmo 12. This is Glenmorangie Triple Cask Reserve. So the Glenmorangie in the blue box. Glenmorangie. And you can probably see on the bottom there that it's matured in a combination of bourbon, new charred oak, and rye casks. So rye is, you would assume that that means rye whiskey, so at least 51% rye mash bill. Rye is different to bourbon because the mash bill is different. You do get high rye bourbons, but this leads us to believe that they've actually used some rye casks, possibly from MGP Indiana, where a lot of rye is made and matured, possibly somewhere else. But we have got a mixed maturation on this one. So traditional bourbon casks, which is the kind of thing that you would expect from, in theory, from the Glenmo 12 that says that it's matured in bourbon casks. I'm not sure myself if I'm convinced that it's exclusively bourbon casks on this one. But you've got bourbon casks, new charred oak, and some of those rye casks, which is becoming more and more common these days, that we're seeing Scotch matured in quasi-bourbon casks, pseudo-bourbon, so kind of trying to give the effect of a bourbon cask but without having to find one of those bourbon casks, which is sad as it is these days. It's not just sherry casks which are becoming harder and harder to find, but even quality bourbon casks are becoming difficult to procure. This one is also, you may have realised, it's a no age statement whiskey, so there's no guarantee that this is any older than 3 years old. I do think that it is older than 3 years old. I've tasted this, and I don't think that it's a rough 3 years and a day, flash in the pan thing. But it is a no age statement whiskey, so you can expect something that is a little bit younger and possibly a little bit less matured than what you get from the slightly more premium 12. It is the same as the 12-year-old and the 10 and pretty much all Glenmo entry-level expressions, here in the UK at least, bottled at 40% ABV. But, like I've said before, for the gentle and subtle style of Glenmorangie, that could be okay. I'm going to get this out of the box now. It does come in a box for the princely sum of... I paid less than £30 for this. If you get it on discount, it is very affordable. I think that the full price of this is about £40, but you can get it for about £30. The full price of this is probably £30 something. I got it for just over £20, which for a Glenmorangie is probably a really good price. As for the presentation, it's reasonably dark for a Glenmorangie. We saw the Glenmorangie 10 recently, which is very, very pale, which we know was matured in first fill and second fill bourbon casks. With this one, you've got, you would assume, some more active oak, especially from the new charred casks. We don't know if the bourbon and rye casks are first fill. I would assume that some of them are not, because this is an economically produced whiskey. But the colour of that, if it is natural, and they don't tell us, because it's not a premium craft presented whiskey, it would appear that it's picking up a little bit more colour from some active oak. Is it chill filtered? I think it probably is. It looks very clear to me. I'm not getting any haze in the glass on this one, which for 40% makes me think that it must be chill filtered. But for the price that this stuff sells for, we don't necessarily care. It is interesting to see that this new affordable Glenmo is matured in kind of bourbon style, non-bourbon casks though, making use of some more available casks and maybe making use of some faster maturations in some of these non-bourbon casks, both to get some spirit out the door and also to make use of some available casks to free up those bourbon casks for the more expensive expressions, as well as also with those more active, more influential casks possibly enhancing some B-grade spirit to give it a little boost. But bearing in mind that the price for this stuff is quite a bit lower than what you pay for the new 12, that might be okay. Let's get some in the glass and find out. I actually quite like the blue. The orange is nice, but I think the blue, possibly because it's a little bit unusual for a Glenmo, I like it. Glenmorangie Triple Cask Reserve on the nose. Light, refined, straightforward. I think more so than the Glenmorangie 12. I think this is a lighter dram. I actually think that there's possibly less cask influence on this one, which is surprising, bearing in mind the mix and match maturation that they're telling us that this one has had. It actually seems to me a little bit closer to the more natural and neutral Glenmorangie 10 that I looked at recently. Light and refined, juicy, fruity maltiness. I think that there is possibly a little bit more prickle on the nose from this Glenmorangie Triple Cask Reserve than what you get on the new 12. Musty oak and some apple and lime, and I think that lime note might be coming through from some of those recharred casks and possibly the rye casks as well. I think that lime and lemongrass and spicy herbal citrusy notes, that is something that I quite often get from a rye cask. Some people say that they get almost a lemon soap note from rye casks or rye whiskies. I'm not getting anything as extreme as that on this one, but it is definitely fruity, wine gums and new oak, like a jellied sweet, reconditioned oak note. Quite creamy, but also with a bitter edge. Getting a little bit of light roast coffee and a little bit of a cocoa, toasted grains, almost a black malt, like a heavily toasted malt, Signet, Ardbeg Ardcore, kind of dark graininess. I think that all of that, though, it moves on to a really nice fruitiness. And if you give it enough time, that fruitiness really evolves into a really nice, fruity maltiness on the nose. So, very pleasant nose. I think that you can tell that this one is an economically produced Glenmorangie. It just doesn't seem quite as premium. It seems a little bit patched together and a little bit younger. But I think that the difference is quite small between these two. I think that it's still a fantastic smelling dram. Let's see how it tastes. Much more on apples and orchard fruits, pears and a little bit of white chocolate. It's not as oaky and syrupy and orangey and citrusy as the 12-year-old is. It's a little bit more refined than that, which I personally like. Again, it's bringing it a little bit more towards the Glenmorangie 10 compared to the new Glenmo 12. Wonderful silky mouthfeel. I am continually impressed by Glenmorangie, if I'm honest, at how well their whiskies do at 40%. I normally crap all over 40% whiskies. I don't want watered down whiskies because alcohol carries flavour, and if you reduce the alcohol down, some people like that and that's fine, but when you reduce the amount of alcohol in the bottle, you're reducing the amount of flavour. If a whiskey is bottled at 100% ABV, you can always add water, but you can't easily take it back out. But with these Glenmorangies though, it's completely opposite. I think that they have great mouthfeel. I think that the presence is really good. They're not world-class whiskies. They are definitely entry-level, approachable, affordable drams. But I think that they punch well above their weight, considering that they are 40% probably coloured and chill-filtered whiskies. There's very, very rarely a moment with any of these new Glenmorangies that I've been tasting where I think that they are underpowered or lacking in any way, and that's really quite an achievement. Wonderful, silky, full mouthfeel. A little bit of a wine gums note, which I think is probably some reconditioned oak. A little bit of plankiness on the palate, especially towards the end of the experience. All in all, though, light, fresh, and fruity. Gonna have one more sip and look at the finish. Wine gums, definitely. Jelly sweets, malty, and a little bit of, I think this has probably come through from the grains and the barrel char, a little bit of a milky coffee note. So an economical dram, economically produced and economically priced, but a very, very pleasant experience. Another very pleasant experience from Glenmorangie. I do think that, going back to something else that I reviewed fairly recently, this kind of is to the Glenmorangie 10 and the 12 as Old Pulteney Harbour is to Old Pulteney 12. And I think that that's really not a coincidence. I think that this kind of bourbon alternative standard malt is going to become very common and familiar over the next few years, as even bourbon casks become even rarer and harder to procure. I think that the question with this one, which a lot of you are probably already asking, is do you go for the Glenmorangie 12 or possibly the 10 if you can still see it in your market, or do you save a little bit of money and go for the Glenmorangie Triple Cask Reserve? Controversial opinion here, and I do like those. I kind of prefer this one to the new 12. Even if they were the same price, I kind of prefer this because it's really closer to the old 10-year-old than it is to this one. This one is a little bit less intense, and that may be a problem for some people, but I think that it's also more straightforward and subtle and delicate, and possibly a little bit more classy too. I think that this one is more like the refined and clean Glenmorangie 10 of a few years ago. Definitely closer to that than the new Glenmorangie 12, which it sits on the shelf next to. I think that both of these are great, and I think that they're actually both great value if you get them on discount, which at least here in the UK is not hard. And I've really been enjoying both of them, and I'm really glad that I bought both. And more than that, if they're on discount again, I'll probably buy both of them again. Although, given the choice between the two, if they were both on offer, I'd probably go for this one, because it's just more my kind of Glenmorangie, and I do think that it's that little bit better value for money. Let me know what you think about these two. I might do another comparison video at some point, maybe with these two and the old 10 and a few of the others that I've got coming up. But let me know what you think about this one, especially if you've had both of these to compare. I know that entry-level Glenmorangie is not going to be everyone's thing, and that's absolutely understandable, but I think as a nice little change of pace, or a casual dram between friends, or just as an affordable bottle of whiskey, because that's fine, I think that these are actually pretty great. Let me know what you think. Thanks for watching, and cheers.